Welcome to Making Democracy Work, brought to you by the League of Women Voters of Honolulu and Olelo. We bring you topics of community interest. I am Pearl Johnson, Chair of Planning and Transportation. Today we're going to talk about traffic and transportation in Honolulu with Panos Prevadouris, UH Professor of Civil Engineering.
That's right, Pearl.
And former candidate for mayor.
A couple of times, yes.
Yes.
But it's been a while.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm. So I came to this subject with what I thought was the announcement that there was a new, Joint Traffic Management Center. That was open. However, I found out that it was the parking building that was open.
Right.
What do you know about the Joint Traffic Management Center?
Well, this is an idea that Mufi floated back in 2008, Mayor Mufi Hanneman. And he put it into actuality and they started creating it. But apparently at some point there was a decision. My original understanding was that there will be the big depot for the parking, for the bus, parking on top of it, and one of the floors will be the joint center. Now, they call it joint center because it's going to house a lot of functions, not only the traffic control center, which is presently at Ward Avenue, but also the police, emergency services, and perhaps the state operations, because the state has a small control center up in the tunnels, the Harano tunnels on the H3 freeway, with fiber optic and all. And actually, it's perhaps a little more interesting sometimes, and I usually take my students there because you can really observe the traffic, and then they get also to know a little bit about the tunnels on the H3, etc. But let's not diverge from the topic. Now, apparently, they are going to start building the Joint Control Center on Alapai. An interesting thing is that in 2010, I went to a conference in Las Vegas, and there was a company there that at the time told me that they had won the intelligent part of the center. I call it intelligent because really when you create a joint center, when it comes to traffic congestion, if you want to improve the flow, you deploy what is called ITS, Intelligent Transportation Systems. That's a federal designation. There is special money for that. Actually, we've spent so much money out of that purse buying the cameras. We have now in excess of 200 CCTV cameras. Those are very expensive because, they're weatherproof. They are supposed to last several years. Pan, tilt, zoom, they rotate. They do all kinds of interesting things. And actually, the city has gone into a second generation. Before, we had the big cameras. Now, actually, the cameras are much smaller, more compact electronics. Now, the center brings in the feeds, which is video, sensor data. That's something we can talk in a few minutes from now. All our streets, essentially, at the stop bar, behind the pedestrian crossing, there is sensors.
Not all the streets.
Most of the streets. Actually, thanks to Mayor Fassi, Honolulu was one of the first cities to have electronic traffic lights. I mean, at the point we did it, we were roughly 20 years ahead of New York City.
What year are we talking about?
He did that in the mid-'80s.
Oh.
So by 1990, when I arrived here, I said, wow. I mean, I was in Chicago, a graduate student, working out the details for the city of Chicago to implement this detectorized system. And I landed in Honolulu, and they had it in 400 intersections already, which is all the loop of Chicago. Actually, Chicago was going with a deployment of 80. At the time,
really?
Fassi had done it for over 300, actually closer to 400 intersections. So we went, into advanced technology early on. That became later on a disadvantage, unfortunately, because smart technology became a heck of a lot smarter between 1985 and 2000. Since 2000, perhaps we have moved into a lot more esoteric things like smartphones, iPads, and all. The basic computers and electronics, the sweet spot was the 90s. That's where they really became smarter and cheaper. Unfortunately, we bought a lot of it in the 80s at very high price and very bulky. Bottom line now, because of that legacy was good, the city has spent a lot of money over the years just getting rid of the early electronics. Now it's reaching an age that, now we have good equipment, let's start using it intelligently. But we haven't reached that point yet because we have a pretty antiquated traffic control center. The one on Ward Avenue has been there since the early 90s. It's basically a large house. Some of the radio station personalities go there to do traffic reports. And there is nothing too intelligent about that center. I mean, you can do, there are 2 or 3 electrical engineers and a couple of traffic engineers that they can do magic with the computers and change the traffic light remotely. We have that ability, which is substantial ability. But it's far from what, very modern cities. One to quote is San Antonio has one of the smartest freeway and city systems. Tampa, Florida, also very advanced. Part of the reason is that those cities bought systems way later. And those systems are not becoming obsolete quickly because they're, to begin with, very fast. So hopefully now the building will go up in, I don't know, in a couple of years. Apparently it's in a state of being open to bid. But then it's the intelligent technology. I really have to look into it and see how much they are going to install. It all depends how smart it's going to be. Intelligent systems range from typically a very basic cell phone, essentially the equivalent, where you can do a little texting and voice, and a top-of-the-line smartphone or tablet. So they can be different things. I don't know how much the city wants to invest on that.
Well, it was pointed out to me a few years ago that these big refrigerator-sized gray boxes at some big intersections are what control the traffic lights.
That's right.
So is that what you're saying, that right now they can control from Ward Avenue?
Right. They have a hot link to them. Most of them now, see, if it's a modern technology, you call it. We spend a lot of money wiring into it. But now that's a sunk cost.
I see.
And now, it's all cabling. Cable is expensive anyway you cut. It's a lot of labor. It's completely, very inexpensive now putting a little modem there. And then you get the signals wirelessly, and it's like that. I mean, for the state DOT, we have installed quite a few sensors, and we're receiving, or we used to receive, a lot of data from Hilo, just like that. In fact, the data via satellite used to go to Boston because the service was the server was in Boston. With a passport, we go to the server and we get data from Hilo.
Now, when you say we receive, who is we?
University of Hawaii, we had a contract to do advanced sensors. And the interesting thing is that, the city of Honolulu, traditionally with the tech, it has been fairly unfriendly. They don't want to open those boxes. The people in Hilo, they were far more open, and they say, okay, just make sure that you bring along with professors and others, you bring certified signal electricians to avoid, and obviously, I mean, honestly, I never touched it. I know what it is. I can read the commands, but I did not touch a signal because it was a live signal. I mean, at the intersection of 2 major streets in Hilo. But from that, you can connect and get real-time data. So, for example, you can have in front of your screen, and if you were curious, you know whether the Pali Highway right now, as we speak, has green light or vineyard at the intersection of Pali Highway with Vineyard Boulevard. So you can know these things. Now
is that now or in the future?
No, it is
wireless?
now.
It is now.
It's been there
and
for
it is wireless now?
No, it's still landline, and the boxes that you noticed, they are not considered obsolete. Quite a few cities prefer to buy them because they're extremely reliable. These big boxes house inside a controller, which has a very standard industry name. It's called the NEMA or Type 170 controller. They're in the thousands in the United States. They're very reliable. But the interesting thing is that they are based on the famous Motorola 64,000 computer. I refer that every time because this is your very familiar Macintosh. The early Macintosh, every traffic light out there, at least 1/3 of the traffic lights in the nation is being run by an early version Macintosh.
Wow.
So it's pretty smart.
Yes.
And that's why actually it can do a lot of things. It has detectors on all sides that it can read which lanes has traffic and begin to give it priority. That comes with, of course, some side negatives. For example, some people complain that sometimes the left lane is all empty, but the signal is giving a left arrow.
Yes.
What happened there? Well, that is in the books. It's called crosstalk. What's happened is that we have a sensor here, but next to the sensor in the lane, there is a big truck. The big truck has a big magnetic field. It has activated this sensor, and the signal, unfortunately, cannot see anything. It's detecting an electrical signal that something big is there. So it keeps, in fact, as long as the truck sits there, this signal will be giving a left arrow for non-existing traffic.
And the truck is actually in the lane adjacent
That's
to
right.
the left.
The truck wants to go through, so it cannot even make its move. So that is a disadvantage that, and if you set it way too insensitive, then some very small cars, motorcycles and mopeds are not detected. So while the system is smart, there is always a threshold. If you make it very sensitive, you detect the next lanes. If you don't make sensitive, then you don't detect motorcycles. And then in the middle of the night, you have a motorcyclist waiting for the left turn. It doesn't come. Eventually, he or she will do it in red light, and that's very high risk. Unfortunately, all systems have a lot of give and take, and the traffic engineer has to make some judgments.
Now, one of my observations, at a time when Ala Moana and Ward Avenue, that intersection, very busy intersection, and there was a time when the traffic below Ala Moana was closed off.
That's right.
And yet the traffic signal for the people coming out from there still went on. This went on for months and months.
I know. There are, one of the problems that the city has, and when I ran for mayor, I put it in the fore, is that it has a lot of technology, it has a sufficient budget, but it doesn't have a sufficient budget for warm bodies. So it has a sufficient budget for equipment, sufficient budget for maintenance, but there are only 5 or 6 qualified people and a number of technicians. We should be having at least 15 people there, not 5 or 6, to run our signals. So it is a problem of staffing. So the problem that has happened there is that they said, okay, for a few months we're going to have this phasing, and then the permanent phasing is here. But then the guy says, well, I'm going to be busy doing a lot of other things, so I'm going to put the permanent phasing there, and well, for 6 months it'll be given green to non-existing traffic. But I'll be done with this thing because I need to get done and move on to the next project because there is a pile of requests to reevaluate or install traffic lights. So they're very backed up.
So you knew about that situation?
Oh, actually, it's pretty bad. And the head of the section, amazingly, I don't know what the work distribution is there, although he's a very capable electrical engineer, a significant part of his time is allocated to approving parades.
Oh my.
That's part of the guy who's in charge of the traffic lights is also approving parades. I think that's pretty silly if you ask me, and not a good use of an electrical engineer's time.
Do you see any prospect of change?
I haven't seen any movement. All the mayors that came afterwards, the council members and all, nobody has allocated more resources other than more maintenance, nothing else.
All right. Now, one thing that looms for traffic is construction of rail.
Right. That is the big fear I have, that this project will create very unpleasant situations for people, and they haven't thought about it. For example, the HART, the agency that is building rail, so far has been making progress. On their website, they say that they have built more than 100 posts. Fine, but building posts, they need 720 of them.
And they're out in the country.
So, yeah. So even if you were to do it with posts only, still they are only about 15% done. But that's the easy part. There is so much disturbance around the median of the street. Then you have to open up the umbrella for the deck. And then you have to do 21 stations that they are almost the size of a football field. So in plain logic, when you are along Camp Highway, Farrington Highway, Dillingham, Queen Street, how can you possibly be building a football stadium 30 feet up in the air and have live traffic underneath, stores operating, pedestrians and customers? So the impacts, I don't know if people have realized, and I don't know how HART will handle it. There is absolutely no detail on their website. A specific fear I had with people that they were talking to me the other day is the airport. I mean, there is so much happening at the airport. It never stops essentially except for 2-3 hours a day. A lot of people arriving, departing, minibuses, big buses, sprinter buses, private cars, taxis. Where is all this traffic going to go when you start building a huge station next to the lay stands and the post office and everything, next to Nimitz Highway and all? Of course, you might say that other people have done it. Well, the fact is that, you know, we're going to be the first system after Miami's 1973 to 1978 fully elevated system. So if we hear other people have done it, different times, different conditions. People bore tunnels into the earth, or they have wide medians like Washington, D.C., the Silver Line, they build it in the middle of Dallas, the Dallas freeway to the airport, or light rail on the street. Where is the example of a major elevated project, anything being done along a Dillingham Boulevard, along a Queen Street and all? Totally concerned about Queen Street. Queen Street is so narrow. Once you start constructing rail, there is no way to shift traffic or people to the left or the right. That thing is going to be so big up there, it's the entire width. What are all the shops
Where
are
on
gonna
Queen
do?
Street is it
In
going
the
to
middle
be?
of it.
No, I mean between what streets?
From
what part of
essentially
Queen Street?
Halekau Villa,
Yes.
and eventually it's going to drift into Queen Street and Kona Street.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very central. It's going to actually affect segments of various streets.
Mm-hmm.
It's Halekau Villa, then it jumps over to Queen Street, then at Sports Authority it jumps over to Kona Street.
Mm-hmm. Now, before it gets to Halekau Villa, it's going to be right in the city, in the middle of the city. Tell me how that's going to work.
Well, actually, when you pass the airport, then it's coming down Dillingham, right in front of the prison, OCCC, straight line to Chinatown. Chinatown does a slight left, right, and goes on Nimitz Highway, right between downtown and Aloha Tower. That's going to be a big station right there at Aloha Tower. From Aloha Tower, if you shoot straight, you go past the courthouse and straight down Halekau Villa. Mother Waldron Park, and then you make a kink into Queen Street, and then another kink into Kona Street.
And then when it gets to Ala Moana, is it going to be on the Mauka or the Makai side of Ala Moana Center?
It is on Kona Street where the buses go, and it dead ends at the store with, at least now recognized as Nordstrom's. I think that Nordstrom's is going to move, but right now where Nordstrom's is right in the middle of, and Kona Street goes under it, the train is going to dead end there. That's where the station is.
So is it going to be up still? How far
Yeah, it's
up is it going to be?
always going to be roughly 30 feet up in the air.
Right. So is it going to be 30 feet up there, or is it has to go above Nordstrom?
No, it's going to stop there. It's going to stop there. That's why, I mean, the city finally, after they got the approvals, they became more truthful about it, that if the rail was ever to go to Waikiki, they have to backtrack almost to Ward Avenue, make a turn, and go in the middle of Kapiolani to go around the convention center to get to Waikiki. But that's we're talking now
Right.
past our lifetime, really.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, under best conditions, I think 2025 will be a year that perhaps the system will be all completed. The city, of course, says 2019. We have pretty much exhausted 2014, and all they have is 100 posts. So 2019, it's not happening. I don't know why they're
Let's
so
talk
confident
about-
with that.
Let's talk about other street traffic.
Sure.
Now, I saw a study that was that said King Street could easily be made. What is it? Reversible traffic, 4 lanes in and 4 lanes out.
Right.
Has there been anything done about that?
Well, Early in the 90s, going back to a little bit of history, the state DOT hired me to do the same study for Dillingham Boulevard because Dillingham had always had a clear alignment. The problem with the present time King Street between Middle Street and Ala Park, it's a hodgepodge. Sometimes it's down to 3 lanes, 4 lanes,
Yes.
6 lanes. So somebody really has to invest the money to make it a nice, straight, 6-lane arterial.
Well, this-
then we can do that. So,
Right. But this study that I saw said that the only thing that would have to be demolished would be one building.
oh, very little, yes.
And
Yes.
they could move a dumpster, for instance,
Right.
and make a lane.
Yeah.
So that it seems that nothing has been done
Nothing has
to
been done.
try to
Right.
make King Street more.
Right. Now, let me backtrack, though, to the Dillingham story. So we did the study, and the study showed that because Dillingham also has a very good access directly by OCCC, there is a ramp to go on the freeway. So it works both ways. You can get down from the freeway to town, and from town, if you reverse it, you can go onto the freeway to go west Oahu. But we did the study. Results were positive. Who was the chairperson at the time of the council and representative of Kalihi? Donna Kim. And she said, you are not going to do this to my Kalihi. So a political decision was made at that point that we are trying to carry too much traffic through Kalihi. It was an unpleasant situation, and they yanked the plug of the project. Of course, political realities and situations change. 20 years later, we can try either on Dillingham or on King Street or both. But tidal flows are a very cost-effective thing because you are really not building anything new. You are just managing what you have better. And as you say, if King Street is 6 lanes, you can have in the morning 4 coming to town, 2 in the opposing direction, and the opposite in the afternoon. It's a win-win situation. We do it on Kapiolani, so we know how to do it. We do it on Kalani and Aole from Hawaii Kai to town. So that's, I agree. It's a non-brainer.
So that it could go from the Fort Shafter exit and up Middle Street, and then instead of turning left or right onto Middle Street, you go straight into King Street.
That's right.
And so a lot of the morning traffic could
Yes.
be routed that way.
Much
and the
quicker
afternoon.
access for Kalihi and downtown, yes. Yeah.
So was there any political objections to that?
Well, this study has always been done by outside parties, such as myself and others. It has never been studied and adopted by the city. So until this is done, there is not going to be any movement.
There seems to be no political will in the city to ease traffic flow.
Right. That's actually what motivated me back in 2008, the combination of do nothing and in addition do rail. And I say, well, they are not doing the things that they are almost free, and they have, a 10% impact or more, and they're going to go with the billions that they're going to have, 5% impact or less. It didn't make any sense for me, so that's what motivated me actually back then to run. There are clearly quite a lot of things we could be trying. Even Ben Cayetano's idea of having a giant park and ride facility at Aloha Stadium, because Aloha Stadium has, over 5,000 stalls completely empty during the weekdays. Quite a few people can park there and then take express buses to town. It's not a solution for everybody, but people who pay expensive parking downtown, they don't want to deal with all the slow traffic and all. Get to Aloha Stadium at a reasonable time, 20 minutes from Kapolei, get an express bus, and in another 20 minutes you're downtown. And it requires very little.
5,000 cars off the
That's
road.
right. That's right. And it requires very little investment. And that's the thing. Even if we fail, what did we fail? We used we rerouted 10 buses, and we used the shoulder on the freeway. All of these are pre-existing things, just a couple of million here and there to make the right-of-way smoother and safer.
Right.
And there you go.
So the two big bottlenecks are the H1, H2 merge and the Middle Street merge.
Right.
This would have relieved so much from the Middle Street merge, right?
It would, definitely, because as you said, ideally 5,000 cars wouldn't, but even 1,000 cars in the peak hour can make a big difference, and that's the whole point of it. Now, I don't know if you noticed if you traveled up and down the freeway, but the freeway has completely changed. And that's a study we did at the UH between 1998 and 2003. We recommended to the DOT to widen the freeway at several sections, and voila, 11 years later, they built the project.
But they didn't even have to widen it. All they had to do was restripe.
Restripe it.
Yes.
It was a little more complicated than that. So
Yes.
it takes a while, and it takes a very extensive application for essentially variance, because the H1 freeway, all our freeways are on the national highway system, and by formula they get 80% support from the feds. But if you do something, and that's the correct word for it, substandard, because the freeways are
Yes.
supposed to have standard 12-foot lanes. Once you narrow them, you're doing something substandard. You need the blessing, and that blessing doesn't come automatically or easily.
But it
So-
wasn't even applied for until when?
Yes, that's right. Well, actually, Linda Lingle applied during that time. They got, I remember the director was Rod Haraga, if you remember. And finally, they got a headline in the newspaper that says, Middle Street solution is coming. And then what happened? 2008 happened. The economy collapsed, and the government went into a preservation scheme and whatever, furloughs and everything else. So a $60 million transportation project was already put on the back burner.
Yes.
So eventually, in 2012, Abercrombie released money, Governor Abercrombie, and by 2014 is all done.
I remember that some of the objections to the narrower lanes were, suppose there are two big trucks
Right.
on either side of me.
Right.
Well, the solution is to let up on the gas,
Yeah.
right?
Let them separate a little bit.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, if you're in between two big trucks, you let up on the gas and let them go by you.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, there are ways around it.
Yes, yes.
At times, there may be some hairy situations where you have two trucks on the Palama Viaduct. Just as a detail, when I wanted to do this,
Yeah.
are we closing on time?
Yes, yes.
Okay, fine. We ran
So,
out of time.
Right, right. Thank you so much, Panos.
You're very welcome.
Is there anything that you wanted to say in 10 seconds?
I think we should talk in the future about it. There is so much to talk about transportation.
Yes, yes. So we must get together again.
Yes.
Thank you very much,
Very
Panos
welcome.
Provaduras, who is UH Professor of Civil Engineering, specializing in traffic. I'm Pearl Johnson with the League of Women Voters. Thank you for watching.